To the Danville City Commission special call meeting today, Thursday, May the 29th. Time is 9:05, and I'm going to call this meeting to order. We have one item on our agenda, and that is fiscal year 26 budget presentation. So I'd like to turn the meeting over to our city manager.
Good morning, and glad everybody came out. Hopefully, this is the last Thursday morning meeting for the budget, but we'll see how things play out today. It's not too far from last week. We went ahead and made the changes that we talked about, and we'll let Lee go through it. The biggest difference for you is based on some of the feedback we've been getting from the 250th. As a placeholder, we put in $50,000 in the budget. It will occur over 2 fiscal years, and so our advice would be, if as a recommendation to you, is to save $50,000. We know that it's going to be a burden on the city at some point if we choose to go down that road, and then balance it at July 1st next year with the next budget, whatever that final tally looks like. And so with that, Lee, go ahead.
So Melanie, again, she provided us an updated where we are in the process. We consider this the full budget presentation prior to the first reading, unless there are, any significant changes that come from this meeting. And as we go through, I'll try to keep you all updated on where in the detail sheets we are. We will go through each fund, general funds, parks, and utility fund in a little more detail compared to the rest, just because those are of the most interest to the public typically, and they are larger funds and are, deserving of a little more attention. But as we're going through, if you have any questions, you're going to talk about something specific on each of these meetings, feel free to stop me as we go through. So just as an overview, your budgeted appropriations, which is your budgeted expenses, what we are bound to by our ordinances for fiscal year 25-26 is in total citywide $74,450,016. Compared to fiscal 24-25, our original budget was $52 million. Our amended budget 23-24 was $70 million. We do anticipate an amended budget. We've talked about that a little bit in the current year. So this final number will be updated as well for our current year. But as of today, our projected budget for 25-26 is $74 million. And throughout our process, as staff, as you all keep in consideration that we do include your strategic. I'm just having trouble with mics today, guys. We do keep your strategic goals and your strategic work plan in mind to create your budget and to even things that, our operations, we want to foster in our operations, your strategic plan. Our capital projects, we want to foster your strategic plan. And so we have aligned within the budget itself these goals and these priorities. And as a recap, our budget priorities, specific tangible things that we have included throughout the dollars in this total citywide budget, they do include your changes to personnel, which included your COLA plus step adjustment for salaries for staff. We did see an average employee increase of 4%. The COLA was 2.9. And then the estimated cost to the city is around a $559,000 increase. We did see an increase in health insurance cost. That was a budget impact of $499,000 increase compared to last fiscal year. We have 3 reclassifications in the Legislative and Finance Department, 3 Police Department reclassification, which includes a 1 employee transitioning to part-time and 1 reclassification for the Utility Administration Department. Position additions included 1 patrol officer in the Police Department, 2 firefighters, and 1 battalion chief. Utility departments, which included 1 utility manager, 1 wastewater utility manager, and 1 wastewater operator trainee. Total impact between the general and utility fund position,
You need a megaphone.
$539,000. Additionally, you have provided investment into 16 community agencies totaling $134,100, and your shared agencies of $355,000. So on to the actual dollars.
Hey, Lee?
Yes.
Real quick, could I ask?
Absolutely.
The Parks and Rec, it's gone up, what, $22 million or whatever. Is that
Yes.
for the,
So that is for 20 million is your potential indoor rec center.
Okay.
So it is, that is your huge jump from 52 million to 74 is largely due to the indoor rec center that we are all aware of and trying to work how we fund that as a priority going forward.
if somebody else looked at that, they may not understand why the jump, so I just wanted to.
Yes.
So when you look at, you look at that budget appropriation sheet over the 3-year run, pulling out capital, you're generally flat over the last 3 years with just basic operating expenses without the addition of new payroll stuff that is ultimately causing a minor trend up. But I feel pretty good about the overall operating expenses being controlled. And credit to the department heads again on that those are, that's just general awareness as you go through the year of what you're spending money on. If you look at the other trends, of course, your utility fund is a big fund, and even with its capital investment, it's trending flat as well, as you'll see down there on that 3rd row from the bottom. So generally, our expenses are fairly stable and have been predictable.
And where I missed a meeting, were we partnering with the potential indoor rec center? And I read in the paper, like, the county had given $1 million or a pickleball court or
So
something?
the county has plans to fund a pickleball court on their own at this point. We have not committed any funds to them. They have committed to us an additional $432,000 for joint projects at Millennium Park mostly, including the woven wire bike trail. So as of this point in time, we don't yet have any public partner for an indoor rec center or private partner for an
Okay,
indoor rec
So
center.
the pickleball court isn't part of the indoor rec
That is
center?
not, no.
This might be an outdoor one.
So they are proposing a outdoor pickleball court area at White's Park.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Yes, ma'am.
So,
Commissioner Holland, on your, the smaller, the 8.5 by 14 sheets that she provided, this set, if you'll look on the back of, well, what is page 2, on the right-hand side of that page, over there, you can see the Boyle County Fiscal Court commitments. and you can identify the projects that they're aligned with. And so what we did was we matched our priorities with the priorities they wanted to push forward. Yeah,
Thank you. And I love how the different projects are broken down.
yes,
There's
okay.
so many in there.
Yes.
So, okay, thanks.
Yeah, and that shows the total of 432, and then pickleball's not listed there, but they have another 600,000 going towards pickleball. And our recommendation on that, just for your sake, is that Josh and Tommy, we hope that can help in the planning process for them. And then if that number, if their final number is some number different than 600,000, if they come back and ask the commission at that time, then that's probably the best appropriate time to talk about whether or not the city's going to participate in that. So that's how we've just kind of left it. Let's go through the planning process, see what the actual cost becomes, and then discuss it further. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all good news. So including the 22 million in the budget means we might consider the bonding on that indoor.
So you could consider the bonding. You wouldn't consider the bonding until you have a confirmed method to pay for the debt service,
Which would be,
which would potentially be a restaurant tax, which would potentially be,
we don't have, this budget would not have that kind of money in it.
this budget has the potential bond issuance revenue, but it does not have a restaurant tax revenue until you make further inroads into deciding on a true path forward for funding the debt service. Then we would not issue the bond. We would not do the bond issuance, but by us putting this in the budget, doesn't commit us to building a rec center, but it does open up the possibilities of us furthering the discussion.
What's bond payment on 20 million? Would it be?
At current interest rates, you're looking at somewhere between 1.3 and 1.65 million a year.
That's Earl's salary, so we could just.
We hope to work over the next month and 6 weeks, now that we're getting clear of the budget work, on some of those specific subjects. We're working on partnerships. We're continuing to look at those facilities. Ultimately, we're going to have to do a pro forma. It's not just a straight bond payment. You're going to have some revenue generated from a facility. You're going to have operating expenses you're going to have to analyze. So you'll have to do a pro forma on a facility so you'll understand the long-term, how are you going to operate it in addition to the debt service on the capital. So there's a lot to consider there, and we are going to effort working through that this summer fully.
So I want to be like the other commissioner. I mean, you want to make sure that the public knows the money, it's set in the budget, but we aren't saying we're spending that $22 million.
Yes.
Until we have a revenue source.
Until we have a revenue source, we could not in good conscience, as city officials, as city staff, issue debt to pay for the construction.
Is our bonding capability okay? I mean, it's just a matter of the debt service.
Yes, our bonding capabilities, I don't have it offhand. We are significantly under our bonding capabilities.
Okay.
We have the capacity to build 2 or 3 $20 million rec centers, capacity-wise.
We'd have to take your salary too.
Yeah. Yes, that's the tricky part. That's the part that gets you, is you have to be able to pay for it.
Thank you.
So our general fund revenue, that is page 2 of 39 of your large packet. Total revenues are budgeted at $23,430,549. Compared to fiscal 25 budget, it's a slight increase from 22 million. We're projecting a small increase based on how the economy is doing in the occupational license fees and your insurance premiums, along with your net profits. Property taxes, we're projecting a slight increase based on new growth in the area. Expenses in your general fund total $24,988,049. That does include capital expenditures and some non-operating expenses. So your total operating revenue at $23 million and your total operating expenses are $23,430,549 for a net zero budget. This is a projected ending fund balance of $8,071,256.
Kevin, to answer your question about debt, the last report we had done was 24. We'll get another one late this summer for 25. It was $161 million debt capacity. The debt owned by the city that is subject against that capacity is about 44. So you have a $117 million that you can, additional that you can bond. Yeah.
The numbers, I mean, and I know it's, you probably estimated it, but the numbers obviously don't include May or part of, or any of June. But you've estimated.
For the estimated year end for
Right.
2025? Yeah, so we estimate, we take the February actuals, make an estimate. And as we go through the budget process, I do update those, but I don't update them every month. So our estimated year end could potentially end a little better on revenue than where we're at 26,401, which is where we estimated it at. Your expenses are probably going to be a little higher than we estimated it as well. But they're just projections based on what we know is happening at that point in time and what we've received up until that point.
So I guess on this page, were you more conservative on revenue? And did you underestimate revenue and overestimate expenses?
For the
'Cause I'd wanna-
budget?
Yeah, I'd want to see it even, right?
So for your total revenues versus total budget? Total
Yeah,
expenses?
right.
So we don't. So it is, I would say it's even when it comes to operations.
Okay.
But your capital expenses, and then we also pulled the potential funding for the 250th out as non-operating. Those are not routine operating expenses that are required to keep the city functioning. And so those typically are paid out of your fund balance rather than net with the current year revenues. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but this is still 1.5 million difference.
Yeah, so that's
what
where,
made me-
that's where your fund balance, when you look at page, it is page 12 of 39.
Okay.
Right? You have your total expenses. We could probably change this and make the calculation a little bit more clear. You have your current year revenue, and then you have your fund balance that carries forward from the previous year to give you total available resources. From that, you subtract your total expenses, which gives you your projected fund balance. Historically, and this is very common in most city governments, your operating expenses come from your current year operating revenue, and then any large capital purchases that are going to last for multiple years, you would pay for out of that fund balance that was carried over from the previous year. And you can see your fund balance carry forward on page 2 at the bottom. So we projected, compared to where we think we're going to end the year last year, or this current fiscal year, we projected a 9.6 million fund balance carry forward.
Oh, that's good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Second line from the bottom
Yes.
in that first column,
Okay.
is 9.628.
It goes, up. Okay, that makes me feel better, and
Yeah.
that's the difference.
So your capital
Thank
is
you.
funded from that number.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
that's really because your capital it's assets that will be used for many, many years. And so, you want your current revenues to be focused on the current year expenses.
If you're putting money in the budget for microphones,
Along with the chairs.
These aren't owed. I think it's where she's sitting on this side. I think it's where that microphone actually is in the room. And I think
Maybe.
it's getting feedback from other microphones over there and cutting it out.
I think I'm just, I don't know, full of
And
metal or
so,
something. I
yeah.
disconnect it. No telling.
as it gets feedback over there, those microphones mute this microphone.
It's confusing, I think somebody different is sitting in their seat today.
Maybe.
I like the way you all explain and keep forcing us to look at the fund balance, because that's the big number for me. Appreciate that.
Looking back in like, I'm sorry, back in like 23, 24, we made a concerted effort to get that fund balance down, didn't we? But we felt
We-
like we were sitting on,
We did,
Taxpayers' money.
between 2022, 2021, you did have a very elevated fund balance. Partially, that was because the city had accumulated a fund balance a little bit. Partially, that included some bond funds for the fire station, so it does look very, very high when you look back historically. But as the fire station was built, and then as we did do projects, including streetscapes, including Jenny Rogers, your tennis courts, that has slowly been brought back down, where now you're at a place where we are, from our fund balance, we're paying for routine replacement of equipment and facility replacements, like the roofs and things like that. And you don't necessarily have that extremely large balance that is not being utilized.
It was like we had a huge fund balance, but then we had projects on the table that weren't getting taken care of, so.
Well, and you all have done, you gotta, it's easy to forget some of the things you've spent money on in terms of investment. You've put, $2 million probably, if I sat down and totalized it in the EDA, you had 1.6 in the property acquisition on the bypass. Will eventually get a return on that theoretically, and you've also put some money into some of the downtown properties related to the downtown master plan. Eventually, you will flip those also, and you'll get that money back, because that's ultimately the objective for both of those. It's not to become a landowner, it's to aid in the transaction. And so those are in the same way, but they'll be longer term. In the same way the city acquired Walker Hall and then got 100% of the money back there. Those are the types of things that you're using your fund balance for in the short term. Long term, you're paying for things like the streetscape. And so we will, we are aware of those numbers on a regular basis. Lee and I do focus on that. And certainly, we feel good about where the number is right now. It's a little bit above the minimum the minimum's about 6, rounding up. And so we feel comfortable with that recommendation as a group, that's probably a good financial position to be in and a good posture. You still have some money above your minimum in case of emergency happens, ice storm, whatever that unfortunate event could be. You're still in a position to be able to offset those emergency expenses and manage the process with a FEMA or somebody, and then continue to stay above your targeted minimum.
And I wanted to mention that, and as a positive, I think for Danville, our minimum is 25%. other cities, I mean, you could go as low as 20%, right, or even lower?
You can go even lower.
But
if-
we
yeah,
haven't,
We
is what I'm
haven't,
saying.
yeah. It's in general from the GFOA, which is the Government Finance Officers Association. They're the national accounting association for governments. 25 is the recommended. You can certainly set it lower, but that does limit your ability, if you spend it lower, to react in circumstances of emergency or in circumstances where maybe you can, take on an additional opportunity that presents itself in the short term. So historically, that is where Danville has kept its target.
Yeah, a long time ago, it moved from 20 to 25.
Right.
And the cities with profiles similar to Danville and Kentucky, that fund balance ranges from 15% to 25%. And majority is 20 and above, 20 to 25. There's a lot of communities that use 20. I like maybe I'm a little bit conservative, but I like the number where it's at personally. Just when you're looking at our cash flow, sometimes those are not predictable in terms of when they'll cycle through. 1 month, they may be lower, 1 month, they may be higher. We have recent experiences with that as that cash flow comes in from the county. Yes, we get it all, but you may not necessarily get what you hope to get in January. You may get it in February, right? And so that extra little bit aids in the cash flow process to keep the city whole during those times where, especially when you have a different capital project going on.
I just think that's a positive to put out there, that we are trying. I mean, we
Yeah.
talked about last year, or one of the years, lowering it, and we didn't, so.
Yeah. It's a good financial position.
Within the general fund, you do have your operating expenses for your legislative department, finance, IT, police, fire, 911, code enforcement, public services. You do include those transfers to your parks fund, cemetery, garbage, museum, and parking fund, and your non-departmental. You have community agencies, your debt service, and capital. So all told, $24,988,049 in budgeted expenditures for the current year. Do you all have any specific questions about any of our departments or anything within the general fund itself?
I'm looking at, where does shared agencies fall in that? Is that community
So that's,
agency?
shared agencies fall into your non-departmental
Okay.
grouping. We can look at, for the future, adjusting so that it has its own mini departments, if that's more clear. If you look at page, that's just historically how we've done it here at the city.
Page 11.
Page 11 of your large spreadsheets. And it is grouped in with other things, but you do see your 75,000 for the airport board, 100 for planning and zoning, 75 for the Economic Development Corporation, 25 for the Economic Development Authority. We did add a new line for the 250th anniversary celebration. As a matter of budgeting and your all's process, you all do include your senior citizens into what is considered as a shared agency, but it is actually included with it, the community agencies, by nature of the structure of their board. It's not quite what is the definition of a shared agency, but we look at it in a very similar manner. So that is included, the 63,000 for the senior citizen center is included in that 134,000 above. You do also contribute $25,000 to the fiscal court for their emergency management director. You have about $12,000 allocated for Sister Cities expenses. Most of that is, that's separate from your allocation to Sister Cities of $1,000 because we get contributions specifically for that program.
One of the interesting things you'll see on that is down at the bottom, on that first column, when we're getting into Parks and Rec, you'll see the second to bottom number is 874,000. That is your operating expense for Parks and Rec. The number below that is a capital expense to offset some of the county's requests and some of the other things that we were doing. And also, that's where any transfer to streetscapes would show up. But you'll see that you're spending $652,000 on capital, which on this sheet shows up in that non-departmental number, right? And so when you separate this 652 and that 855, and you pull it from that 24 number, that's where the numbers where she's discussing that are balanced, that's your operating expenses. So, but this is where your capital for parks comes from.
Would you say Sister Cities at $12,000 is?
So that's about what they spend each year for the program itself. But we get mostly that 12,000 is covered by contributions. So that comes into your general fund contributions revenue line. And it's dedicated funds. So when we receive those in, that program is administered by the city. And so they go to a restricted bank. But it's offset by revenue in, they're almost too big, our sheets. 10, 1150, 4600.
I'm just trying to balance it because they come and ask for money, and we gave
Yes.
them $1,000, and then we have
Yes.
$12,000, so it's like,
So the 12,000 is completely offset by the 12,000 in our contributions. Those two net out. And then the $1,000 that we provide to them is the city's contribution itself to the program.
okay. Thank you.
The Pioneer School of Drama, I guess, is that Pioneer Playhouse?
That is Pioneer Playhouse.
Yes.
I believe that was at one point their legal W-9 name, if it's not still.
Okay, so under other, which one is this year for the Development Corporation?
It is 75,000. It is 10/19/10/7920. That's the name of the general ledger account, but that's where we charge it to. It doesn't necessarily have this, because they have changed names, and we can change the name certainly to make it a little bit more clear.
And like last time, we gave an amount and then we set aside an amount for an ask.
So-
Is that available again? Like if they had a project, we had set aside 75 last time.
So our understanding from the last meeting, or the meeting prior, I believe, where you were unfortunately
Right.
absent.
Right.
The commission went through each agency and allocated a specific amount, and so we didn't have an ask for that one. I will say, because you're not budgeting down to your fund balance limit, if they can come back with an ask if a project comes up, and that you all can discuss it and
Okay.
allocate additional budget funds at that time. I think that was our conclusion from that, because of the other priorities that we wanted to fit in the current year. And they have not yet to date requested anything for the current year's ask. So we felt safe in doing it that way.
Yeah, so it is, the reason the EDC isn't necessarily the organization that should stockpile money. So if you want to have a fund balance, theoretically, you should consider the EDA strictly because they have more eligibility to cover expenses, right? There's a limit to what the EDC technically can fund. Specifically, so like in local incentives need to come through the city and the county. So any program they come up with there ultimately is going to come through you all at this level. If there's some acquisition to be done, that's got to go through the EDA, so you're going to shift money in that direction. So you are prepared to be nimble, but the important thing is for whatever program they come up with, it has to go to the correct organization to be implemented legally, right? And so the EDC, for example, can't really own the land that with public dollars. The EDA has to do that. And so when you're putting in public dollars, you got to watch what you can't just have a fund balance just because it's the EDC. If there's a fund balance, theoretically, it should end up at the EDA because that's the place to house public dollars. Does that make sense? So it's really
it does.
just making sure that we're trying to account for it correctly rather than necessarily saying that you're stepping back from any support of economic development. I would argue that's not true. Your investment in staff here in the building is another $100,000 in actual cost to support economic development that others aren't bearing. So even with this, if you're saying those two numbers represents the city's total investment, well, no, it's not. On its surface, you've got another $100,000 you're doing with staff. Melanie helped coordinating the ribbon cutting at the airport yesterday, for example. So your beginning point is not 100, your beginning point's over 200, right? So keep that in mind and have confidence in that and have that, understanding for yourself too.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah.
And like we said, if they have, for instance, I know they're working on a lot of small business development. If the programs they've been discussing come and they do need an ask, they can come back and ask for it, and you all can have the opportunity to publicly discuss and decide whether you're going to fund that specific project or not. So the process is the same, I think, compared to other, like, for instance, the fiscal court. They are much more bound to their original set budget than we are by laws related to county funding. And so we do have an opportunity in that manner that they may not. So,
And like the operating fund transfer to the museum.
yes. So that one includes, because the museum fund does not maintain a fund balance like the general fund does, we did have to increase that compared to prior years due to the capital roof project that we need for the old federal building. So typically, we transfer somewhere between 50 to 75,000 for operations. This year, it's significantly higher at, where am I at? Museum. 55,000. So not significantly higher, but
No.
it is for things like HVAC work on the old federal building. We're not projecting any expenses tied to the new building at 410 West Main in the current year, just based on the terms of their current lease, other than the agreed upon reimbursement for utilities. We did structure that lease to, until they finish their remodel and fit up of the building, that we would not take over maintenance of elevator, HVAC, roof, windows, those kind of
So it's
things.
just maintenance, basically
Yes.
maintenance of the federal building.
Yes, and it's a very old building, yes.
The airport board, 1019-107160, $75,000.
Yes, sir.
Part of that is your grant match on their master plan grant, on the programs that they already have that are ongoing.
Yeah, so that's.
Right,
that's not the
right.
application. So every time I go back and look at one of these pages, it just creates more questions. Just leave it alone.
Is the parking garage bond paid off?
It is not. It is not. My understanding is we do have about sometime in mid-2030 is when that debt service will be completed.
I had that up, I can,
I had it, I
We do have a couple that will be finalized in the 2020s, but they're pretty small, and they were refunding of previous debt services. And I think one is general fund and one is stormwater fund. Do have quite a bit of debt that rolls off in 2030, the 2030s between multiple funds. We've got some that, I think maybe one in the 2040s that will be in the utility fund, and a few in the utility fund that are 2050s.
The parking fund looks like it would be paid off in 2037.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was refinanced. Yeah,
When was that built?
2007 to 9, well, 2000, I think it was completed in '07. I don't know why I said 09. I think it was from '05 to '07.
And your debt service probably would have started in
It's-
maybe 2008,
Yeah.
2009, yeah. So I think they did take advantage of some lower interest rates sometime in the 2017, 2014s-ish.
It was refinanced in 2014, and the other part of it was refinanced in 2017, it looks like.
Yeah, so we'll move forward. We are going to jump a couple pages in your large packet to your Parks Fund on page... Parks revenue begins page 18. Total parks revenue includes the potential bond proceeds of $22 million for the indoor rec. But your operating revenue, which is just for the operation of the parks, is budgeted at $1,740,966. Your operating expenses, which doesn't include any of that capital, is budgeted at $1,740,966 for a net zero. You are budgeted, like we had discussed, $874,000 from the city's general fund. You are budgeted $390,413 from the Boyle County Fiscal Court to contribute to capital. We do have a anticipated grant that we applied for several years ago for playground equipment of $80,000. Park generated service revenue, which includes building rentals of $80,000. 86,000 parks revenue for your programs, including your baseball, softball, facility use fees, concessions at $325,000. Other recurring revenue, concessions at Jenny Rogers for non-program related things, investments, miscellaneous items at $14,950. $50,000 in sponsorships, for a total of 1.7 in operating revenue, and with that potential bond issuance that you are discussing at $24,473,000. Expenses for the utility fund come in at $935,000 for Millennium Park, $416,000 for the Bunny Davis Fitness Center, $93,000 for the pool, $237,000 for Jenny Rogers, $45,000 for community parks. You have debt service, which is strictly for leased vehicles, of $12,745, and your capital, which does include the previously talked about indoor rec plus your other capital items of $22,652,500. And the city has slowly increased its own contributions to the operations of the parks by, we invested into staffing, increasing their salaries. For part-time folks, we've added, maintenance supervisor in the last year. They've kind of reorganized, they've got staffing over at Jenny Rogers. So several different initiatives have occurred throughout the park system just to help improve the park's operations.
The debt service would be if we spent the 22 million.
If you spent the 22 million in future years, you would have potential other debt service. Current debt service, 12,000 is strictly, they have 3 leased vehicles, I believe, for maintaining the park system.
That would be nice.
So we've talked about parks and a few things came up. So if you need to go back, let me know. We'll just keep moving forward so we're not here all day. You have several other governmental funds, municipal aid fund, that budgeted revenues at $763,000. Budgeted expenses are at $940,000. That is an intentional drawdown of the municipal aid fund balance for some capital projects, including the Boffman Avenue sidewalks. They also we do anticipate some grant funding for that in the near future for a projected fund balance of $712,451. Your opioid settlement, we are projecting $55,000 in additional opioid settlement funds. We have not yet budgeted any appropriations or expenses for the opioid settlement fund. We have had recent discussions with the health department and ASAP about potential ideas for use of those funds, but they're highly restricted. I believe they talked to Chief Gray in the recent weeks. So hopefully we'll be bringing ideas back to you all about what we could use those funds for, but until we have a concrete idea, we did not budget any appropriations for those. Police safety is your highway safety grant that you get from the state each year. We've budgeted $6,000 in revenue and $14,000 in expenses. Those do tend to line up a little bit more closely in revenues versus expenses, but sometimes the timing of when we get those reimbursements back impact the revenues versus the expense side. Your drug forfeiture funds, we've budgeted $7,550 in revenue, $7,500 in expenses. Those funds are also restricted in use. The police department is very careful to utilize those specifically for drug related appropriate items, certain equipment, certain services. Your streetscapes fund, we've got some minor interest in revenue of $1,000. We've budgeted $25,000 to work on the Walnut Street design for the current year. So pretty minor activity in most of those funds.
Didn't we pay for the streetscape out of cash on hand originally and then?
We did. So
Did we then bond it or?
we did not do any debt service or bonds related to anything. All activity related to streetscapes was through transfers from the general fund to the streetscape fund from the fund balance that we had built up over many, many years. None of it was bonded. None of it was utility related funds. It was strictly general fund dollars.
That's all paid for. I like that.
None of it was ARPA funds. None. It is not, streetscape did not qualify for ARPA funds, and we did not use it. You may be thinking of we did do a grant for businesses For streetscapes, however, we did not use ARPA funds for that. We had a revenue recapture with those ARPA funds, which then freed up general fund dollars for that grant. It's very specific. So we will move on to utility fund. Total utility fund revenue is budgeted at $17,411,341. This does include some anticipated grants that we are going to be receiving related to capital projects, along with some anticipated KIA loans, for a total operating revenue, which is your charges for services, of $12,792,790. Total expenses budgeted for the utility fund are $19,748,594, which does include $6.9 million in capital expenditures. You do have a total operating expenses of $12,792,696. So that does include the operations of your utility administration department at $1.5 million, your water treatment plant at $3 million, your water distribution at $1.4 million, wastewater treatment plant at $1.8 million, your sewer collection and rehab at $1.1 million, Paravel, the Paravel operations related at $257,000. You have some non-departmental expenses. Some are similar to the general fund. You do have an interfund charge that comes back to the general funds, among a few other things, of $916,000, debt service at $2.7 million, and that capital at $6.9 million to get to your $19,748,000.
I will say the biggest threat to the utility fund budget right now, as we've tried to organize the capital in the way that we see it priority-wise, Marshall's done a good job of that and the utility staff, is the state is putting more and more pressure on us to begin the next phase of the wastewater plant. So if something jumps out of order, it will be pushing that forward. Recall, we broke it out into two phases. One, the project at the wastewater plant requires the construction of these separate pieces. And so wastewater plants can be phased very easily. And so we did that. And the first phase was moving everything out of the way for new equipment. And then we also replaced all the electrical equipment in your sludge handling facility and your main building as your control building. And then so the next phase will be purely a capacity upgrade, capacity component, which is adding another aerator, adding 2 new clarifiers. And so that's where that's sitting, but we are getting Marshall specifically. He's dealt with the folks in Frankfurt over the last couple weeks. They are putting pressure on us to increase that. And the reason they do that is when our daily flow approaches, so our plant is rated at 6.5 million gallons. They will only let us operate at about 80% for so long before they require us to do an upgrade, okay? The reason that we hadn't felt pressure about that is when the plant, the last time it was upgraded in the late 90s, the capacity was set at 6.5 so that it was easier to administer the lab. It made it easier to staff it. It produced less tests. The plant actual capacity was just a little bit higher than that, like maybe closer to 8. And so we've not, as staff, been necessarily alarmed by the flow approaching the 85% range. But at the same time, we know that at some point we're going to have to talk about a capital project there that is significant. So what we're trying to do is have control of that rather than being on the backside of a problem where we're being reactive. And so we anticipate the rate study Marshall's working with Salt River over the next few months and the end of this year to include debt service for that. So then that rate study will include some analysis of that, so we're prepared. But one of the things that could upset that process is the state's opinion of that flow. I want to make sure we verbalize that with you at this meeting, just because that is not accounted for here. Because we would like to put off that project until you have new demand coming into the system. So you would have a large industry coming back online, you would have a large customer coming into the system that required you to do an upgrade. At this point, the North Mercer Sanitation District has an $11 million project that continues to expand sewer on the east side, on the west side of the lake near Bergen. They have the potential to pick up about 500 to 800 customers in that region. Things like that will trigger as that comes online, because all their flow comes through Danville, and we do get revenue for that. Things like that will cause that trigger. And so we certainly, your debt service would account for that, so it wouldn't necessarily be people in Danville paying for somebody somewhere else. That's not what would happen. That's why you do a rate study and allocate the cost accordingly. Notwithstanding, though, the process of that could cause you to speed up that bonding necessary to support the phase 2 of the wastewater plant.
And we did, when you look at your capital sheet, last page is utility fund, we did include funds for the design in the current year budget for that wastewater treatment plant phase 2. It's your design WWTP phase 2. So Marshall is very aware and very proactive of that. When you look at your largest sheets, your utility fund begins on page 28
What was
for
your question,
revenue.
Donna?
I was just gonna say, if a big industry came in, or how long would it take us to be ready?
We can support
Can we
an
support
industry
the
right now.
asset?
Yeah, we can support an industry right now, but the thing is, when we get the next one, it's time to start.
And it
So-
would take a couple of years.
It will take about 18 months to actually,
To do.
which is why we want to go ahead and start the design and continue
ahead of it.
to be ahead of that. Yeah,
Especially if Frankfurt is
Yeah.
involved.
yeah.
I mean, already.
Frankfurt could speed us up
They
by
could
just
speed us
saying, do it, right? And my instinct is that could happen, is the reason I want to make sure I verbalize it.
I wonder what other towns, small towns do. I mean, we've been good and proactive at keeping up, and
I would argue with that the city of Danville spent more on their wastewater system than other cities our size typically do. Notwithstanding, we are a beacon, and therefore we're
Yeah.
subject to a little
Expect
bit higher scrutiny, so that they can go somewhere else and say, look, Danville did it. You all got to do it too. And so that does happen to us, and unfortunately, and which is fine. I mean, the work needs done. We need to be compliant. We need to be all those things. And so we just hear it and are as responsive as we can be.
And they're saying we're 85% of the 6.5 million, not the 8 million.
Correct, yeah. Yeah, your numbers, that's exactly right. So that's why I say, as staff, we're comfortable as we get closer to 6.5 million gallons, but when that number, when you're getting bumping regularly 6 million gallons a day in a wet year like we're having, they're going to make you proceed, and so we just have to be ready for that, and Marshall is, and I know the design reflects an approach that we're going forward with it, and so that's how we're looking at it.
We increased capacity above the 8 million at that point.
I'm not sure what the next phase, I'm not sure what the number he's targeting. Yeah. Off the top of my head. We've talked a lot about it, I just don't know exactly what that number becomes.
Okay, new person.
So we are, the budget does include the budgeted revenues include your grant from the EDA that we're anticipating of 1.9 million. That's a match for Clark's Run sewer improvements. We're also anticipating a grant of $959,000 related to the 2168 bypass water extension. Some of our projects will require some SRF funding, loan funding, which Marshall has been able to secure us. So we've got about 3.4 million in loan bond proceeds, 1.1 in grant funding. Your operating revenue charges related to water service are budgeted at 6.3 million, with 5.8 of that being directly from water service charges. Sewer service related items at 6.2 for your sewer service charges, and then some miscellaneous other recurring revenue of 208,000. Let's see. Do you all have any other specific questions related to utility funds? We hit this one pretty quick.
See, I've been asked to take a 5-minute pause,
We can certainly do that.
which might be, 10 or 15 with these guys, but
If I will take care of it.
I'll get rid of
Yes, we will continue. Do you all have any other questions about the utility fund? No? Okay. So you do have several other minor funds, including your cemetery, stormwater, garbage, museum, and parking funds. The cemetery fund is budgeted at $261,500 in revenue. You can navigate to page, actually, no, page, next time I'll put page numbers on here as a cheat sheet. Page 23 of your packet. The largest share of your revenue does technically come from services at the cemetery for cemetery lot sales and the job work related to burials of $130,000. We are anticipating a general fund transfer of $125,000. Some miscellaneous interest at $6,500. Expenses are budgeted at $407,163. That does include personnel of $223,000, contract services of $162,000, which does include a very large mowing contract, $19,000 other miscellaneous items. You do have some minor debt service in this fund as well related to vehicle leases, $2,000, for a total of $407,163.
How many employees we have at the cemetery?
That's a great question. I have no idea. Two. You have a superintendent, a cemetery sextant, and a cemetery helper. I don't know his or her title.
Okay.
The other administration related to the cemeteries is performed by the executive assistant in Public Works. Some of it's done by our city clerk, related to deeds and things like that on the administrative side. And then finance comes, all dollars flow through me.
So the salaries, the 2 or 23, does that include other salaries?
That just includes the two employees related to,
Total cost for the two
Yeah.
employees.
Total cost?
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
The, unless I'm wrong, I think we just got two. The overtime, though, is a big number. That's to fund all the employees that work.
Yeah, and for instance, if we have a weekend burial or something like that.
Public Works has to infill that.
Your stormwater fund is budgeted at total revenues of $1.3 million, total expenses at $1.5 million. Detail of the stormwater fund begins on page 25. Your service fees are budgeted at $706,365 with some miscellaneous interest. That does include the planned rate change that will be presented by Mr. Morgan in the very early part of fiscal '26, to go from $3.36 to $3.75 for your stormwater fee. There's also a $600,000 loan/bond issuance anticipated for the project for the Twin Brook culverts of $600,000. Stormwater fee includes personnel cost of $634,000, contract services of $51,000, other operating cost of $54,000, some debt service related to stormwater, including one debt issuance of $49,000, and your capital expenses of $750,000 total for your total expenses of $1.5 million.
Yeah, I was looking at that upside down on the cemetery personnel. The 223 is all cost included, and you do have 2 employees.
Total salaries are about 130, but
30,
the
yeah.
rest is your retirement, your health costs, taxes, all that good regulatory compliance. Your garbage fund is budgeted at 1.6 million in revenue. That's largely, page 27, largely derived of your services, along with a $50,000 transfer from the general fund. Expenses related to the garbage fund are 1.68 million, which does include your contract for waste disposal, along with 45,000 to the fiscal court to support the recycling and convenience centers that the city is jointly owns with the county. In fiscal 20, we've got one more year. So Josh is and Earl have been talking about the upcoming renewal, or we need to rebid that contract out, and ideas on how we could potentially reduce costs for customers, reduce costs for the city, how to better structure that contract.
Is the difference between the revenue and expenses still have to do with tracking down people and getting?
Yeah, that's largely what it is. For instance, if you have an apartment complex and you have, 15 water bills in an apartment complex, and 2 people move out and that apartment's empty for 2 months, well, they don't necessarily have a water bill where they're paying that charge, but the apartment complex may not necessarily, we may not get the information in time to stop the garbage fee from being, so the can is, they stop to pick the can up, and so they charge us for that, and we don't have anyone to charge. That's part of it. I think it's just a very complicated process, and we've got efforts in to make it better.
The extra can unit cost approach is a good idea, makes a lot of sense. Problem is, for us, sometimes they'll call Republic to get the extra can. Republic addresses that, and then it doesn't get communicated to billing, and it gets incorporated into the bill for a delay. So
Yeah.
that's no, I know that sounds really easy, but it honestly, it takes a while for that to trickle into the actual bill to the customer. And so that was a little bit unforeseen, but that single issue has caused a little bit of a delay. You got to keep in mind, the garbage is not intended to be revenue stream for the city or anything like that. The goal is for it to break even. And that's our target, and that's what we're trying to get to. And so we continue to look at better ways to do that across the board.
So what it has done to clean up our community has been amazing. They have uniform cans, scheduled pickups, and it's just like, wow. No black bags, and whatever. It's been a mess. And it was a struggle. But it's been very beneficial to me. People to raise Cain about it.
So we will move forward to our museum fund, which is page 38. Revenues consist of a very minor amount of interest plus transfers from the general fund. The expenses are strictly related to maintenance of the facilities that we own. As we had talked about, we don't have any budgeted or anticipated cost associated with the newer to the city building at 409. Everything budgeted is related to the existing facility at 401 West Main, the old federal building.
It's 36, Kevin.
Oh, 36. I just can't read.
She did that for me. She's trying to fool me. You did, thanks.
I was baffled too there for a second, I'll be honest with you.
Well, it turns out there's not actually 39 pages. I think two of those extra pages are We don't print because it's mumbo jumbo from our system, but I
You're
just.
in charge of our numbers.
Well, you guys you should have asked, can you read? That was not on the interview. They did not ask if I could read or if I know what numbers are, so. Most of the expenses are related to utility services and the maintenance of HVAC. We repair those everywhere in the city all the time. There is some minor debt service related to the energy efficiency project, and there is a budgeted roof replacement at the federal building for next fiscal year.
Main building right next door, sort of holding its own.
So that one is, until they finish their fit up of their remodel, we don't take over any maintenance of their HVAC, elevator, roof, et cetera. So once they get that completed, then we are obligated to maintain their HVAC, maintain the roof, maintain the windows, et cetera.
They put a new cover on, a new roof on?
I believe they are, but I would have to ask Josh Morgan how far, what the status is. So.
That's neat. That's been another great project, you know. That's part of that fund balance.
Those did come from the expense to purchase that building, to get it in, to the city's, to give the Art Center the ability to operate within it. The city did use ARPA funds for that back in 2022.
Good investment.
And last but not least, on page 37 of 39 non-existing pages. Total revenue for the parking fund is $403,100. A small transfer of $75,000 from the general fund is anticipated. The majority of the revenue is generated from operating the garage and the rental fees associated with the garage and the parking lots, some minor interest and parking fines. We are budgeting $475,591 in operating or in expenses total. That includes $25,000 for some parking improvements. That does include $272,000 in your debt service related to the debt we had talked about previously. That does include $71,000 in personnel costs, $102,000 in contract services, and $5,000 in other operating costs.
That's being paid for.
So all said and done, total appropriations for fiscal year 25-26. The first reading will be presenting at the next regularly scheduled commission meeting of $74,450,016.
Can I ask a question about the parking? garage?
Absolutely.
The revenue versus the expense?
Yes.
expenses?
Yes.
It's almost paying for itself.
It is almost paying for itself. Largely, that's because of the rate increases that we have done in the parking garage over the last year and a half. Those are defined and laid out in our leases, those long-term leases with the parking garage. Previous, we followed the lease that allowed us to increase those rates by, what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, it's not the state COLA, it is the COLA defined by the Department of Labor, which is a little different than state COLA, but there's a calculation that was created when those leases were made to help ensure that future cost of the garage were captured by the revenue. And when you look back, especially back toward fiscal 22, 21, you do see a larger increase in that parking garage and parking related revenue. And that's really helped us in the last couple of years offset the costs, which it should.
And then the public has the opportunity for all that free parking after hours.
They do. They have free parking every day for 2 hours in the garage. Every day you have 2 free hours of parking in the garage. Over 2 hours, there is a cost associated. It's free after 5, I believe. Free on the weekends. There is lots of free parking on Main Street, free parking on your side streets. There are lots. Within the lots themselves, some are leased spaces, there are some customer spaces within the lot. So there is lots of free parking in downtown Danville.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
That's really all the slides we have. So what, like I said, we will have the first reading, the ordinance of the first reading of our budget at our next regularly scheduled meeting, with the second reading anticipated at the second meeting of June. We do have presented, a balanced budgets that we think have accomplished most of the priorities initiated by the commission, most of the needs of operating by the city. We didn't get everything we want, but I don't think anybody ever does, so.
Additional full-time staff?
We have 3 additional, make sure I'm not misspeaking. 1 additional full-time staff in the police department, 3 in the fire department, and 3 in the utility department. 7 additional full-time staff, and then 5 reclassifications of existing positions to better align with their departmental needs and the duties assigned to those respective employees. All employees will see a adjustment on a step on their scale and an adjustment to their scale. Benefit-wise, we did see a increase in health insurance costs, and while sometimes that doesn't, as an employee, they may or may not feel that that's a change in their benefit, but the city has made a huge commitment to maintain fully funded health care, which working in both other government agencies and private sector, that is a very big benefit that not a lot of employers are able to provide in today's costs.
And remember, the 4%, well, the COLA in the step maintains where we're at relative to the market. And the net change in the marketplace, according to our information that we're getting, this change covers that change. And so we're in the same position within the market that we were this time last year.
Is 4% the average or 4%?
It's the average.
It's the average.
Yes, because you have to take into consideration some folks, have been with the city long enough or have enough experience that they're at the top of their scale, and also some steps are bigger than others. But the average change for employees is 4%.
My question I always ask, I'm the new kid on the block. I guess I'm in the, whatever position, but starting salary for new employees with 0 experience. No, yeah. No.
That's a great question.
Give me just a second.
Unknown.
Well, we were striving for the $15, and I know a lot of folks didn't think
$15 is what our part-time employees get. I know all of our full-time employees are higher than that. I don't know how much higher.
well, everybody said you gotta move to a $25 an hour. Remember, we were struggling for 15 for a while, so, well.
25.
I know, yeah.
I still put the benefits in there, if you do that. then
If you
get
do
close.
that, it's considerably higher. When you take in the full package of your health benefits, retirement benefits, and including your salary, it is a very, from that perspective, it is a competitive to the marketplace.
So fully funded healthcare. Yeah, well, I would define what that means, yeah.
So currently, your minimum grade, if you started at our lowest graded position, you would start out at 33.5, and that would be with 0 experience. And that would be on a 37.5-hour scale.
That's
Or hour
before the
week.
change.
Before
that
the
is going into
change.
the budget.
We don't have updated until we have at least first pass draft. We don't produce the updated scales, since it's not yet a legally binding number.
One thing put in our fully funded healthcare package.
That includes your
health
healthcare,
Yeah, your,
dental care, vision,
and your life coverage.
life insurance.
The life insurance is a huge benefit to the city. It covers 2 times your salary with a max. The health insurance program being fully funded with no cost, no direct cost on a monthly basis, but to the employee. Your dental program is the same. And then you have access to, well, we provide short and long-term disability and coverage, and then you have also the option to supplement that with additional coverage.
So that, I was just gonna say, that includes this is from Randy's, your all's approval in one of our previous meetings. Your medical max liability at 3.7 million, dental coverage at 138 for the city. This is the cost associated. Vision at 33,000, basic life 36,000, short-term disability at 40,000, long-term disability at 40,000. There's a brokerage fee at 53,000, your Cobra TPA at 2,000, and your True RX, which offsets some prescription costs at 45,000, and your Sharks, which offsets those prescription costs at 48,000, for a total plan maximum of $4,162,853.
And you said life insurance, it's 2.5 times the average salary. So for the mayor and the commissioners, it'd be 2.5 times our $5,000?
Yes, our we have expanded full-time basic life coverage at 2.5 times our salary, first responder, line of duty rider, up to 100,000.
We're not considered full-time.
You are not considered full-time.
And
Although you put in full-time hours,
no, I don't want to be there.
mentally and emotionally full-time.
Yeah, the life coverage is 2 times. The life coverage is 2 times the salary.
Yeah, 2.5.
It was 1.5. We increased it to 2 times this year. Right.
Well, I ask those questions because I get asked all the time about coming out and speaking. And the one thing I try to sell to them is that this is a place you get a job, it's a career for your life. And there's opportunity for growth, but the starting salary at 33.5, then all these healthcare benefits. Man,
You know, being on that other side, the city's made a lot of, tons of improvements since 2020 for the salaries. It's basically like $16.50 is the lowest pay coming in an hour. That's pretty good.
Would you get $16.50?
If it's based on the 37.5.
Yes, yes.
$16. So that's,
The 37 hours times 52 weeks? How'd you arrive at the
it's
16?
2,080 hours.
She's,
I just know that. It's just,
yeah.
She just
But I'm
knows.
saying
She
that's
just
really
knows.
good Because it
Yeah.
used to be,
Yes.
you might have had a public works person at $9 an hour.
Yeah.
And that's,
Is it as hard as working?
and you had your, fire,
was
police were at $11. I mean, so that's,
And when you look at the previous adjustments, when we were trying to get closer to market, I don't remember how much was each year, but there was one year we had, the average employee increase was 14%, right? So we've gotten a lot closer. One year, I think fiscal '24, we were closer to 9%, fiscal '23 was the 14. So there've been huge changes in total compensation in the last 5 to 7 years.
And that's why we've had employee retention.
Yes.
And less turnover.
Yes.
So, well done.
Yes.
Not only employee retention, but I think professionalism has really stepped up. That's great. I, for one, am happy with this budget. I think you all did a good job with it. I compliment you. And just another quick shout out, I'm happy with the physical court kicking in some money for projects, Parks and Rec.
You excited about the $600,000 pickleball too, aren't you? That's a shocker. Well, I agree with Commissioner Siri. I don't agree with him too often, but I do this time.
I do too. Thank you all and staff for working hard to get this.
Well, and again, the end above all is that we're healthy when it comes to the fund balance. And it's healthy enough to where if something major comes up, we can take care of it. And then those unexpected things that are good opportunities like next door was, we can take care of a few of those possibly, so that's good. And I was shocked when I saw this $74 million in that paper this morning, so
It adds up.
yeah.
Well, if you take the 22 or whatever out of it.
It is
Where-
is
where we
very
were last year,
comparable
pretty
to
much.
last year,
Oh,
yes.
I agree, but I, no.
Yes.
Yeah,
I know,
yeah.
when we first see it, it's,
Yeah, but I was
Kind of
shocked in a
shocked.
good way that you all included that, I said, okay, suckers, if you want to really consider this, here's what it's gonna do to you.
That's what it looks like on paper,
Yeah,
for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah,
Yeah. The worst one I saw was that the one year where we had a $94 million budget, where we had the wastewater plant going on, the fire station going on. We had all those projects that were ongoing at the same time. We had the water line, and it was that, the capital, but it was extended over the multi-year process too. And so it was,
and the thing
that was
about
a
that,
big spike.
the thing about that $25 million, what I keep saying, $25 million, if it's, the county 1/3 and the community 1/3 and the city 1/3, it really changes that number. See, I keep thinking that these communities that are doing this stuff, that without the restaurant tax, they're getting lots of support from their partners out there, the big corporations and businesses in this town. The hospitals, they're getting some big bucks on getting some of these things done. Wow. It's interesting. Of course, Kevin could put up 1/3 of the money, get it started, back to harassing our interpreters and stuff.
Tiffany will take that check as soon as you're ready to write it.
That's right. I know it.
probably wait to put it in the bank maybe next lifetime. Wait.
Other questions or comments from the commissioners?
We appreciate your all's leadership. You all have given us a lot of feedback through the process, and it's helped make this a very easy process, honestly, this time, and we appreciate that.
I would still like to say again, look at our fees that we charge for code enforcement, things that people are really using. I mean, if it's on them, look at those fees to see if we can change those, if it helps anything in the future. Not
Yeah.
just code enforcement, but those fees that we're charging outside of
Yes, that is one of our
business license.
early fiscal 26 tasks. I've got, one of my staff is working on some research to find what other people are charging and things like that. We're, hopefully, within the next 3 to 4 weeks, we'll have our new business license software updated and in process, and so we can do things like assess whether a $50 fee is appropriate or renewals are appropriate, just to see what that, our database was. I joke about how messy it was, but it was much worse than even I realized until we have to move it into a new one. Just things like, well, old ones, they have a mailing address and they don't have a legal or a physical address if they're old. And sometimes, unfortunately, that happens. But it's a lot of, that's on our list to do, and we are aware.
There's a lot of cities that are, Doge would have a field day on some of the software packages that exist in not our local government. We've been pretty proactive over the years, but man, that it's hard to commit to transitioning, like you're saying. You get so used to working in some of those situations, and but it is inefficient.
Well, if you just consider like this one, for instance, you have to, in our new software, you have to have you have to have an owner's first name and an owner's last name. Well, in our old system, it's one field. So I have to physically take the time out to separate those into multiple fields. And when you think about a name, names are complicated because you may be, so-and-so doctor, so-and-so CPA, so-and-so lawyer, or you may be a business name. And so you have to convert those one field in our old system into multiple fields. Same with addresses. Well, our old system had addresses as address 1 field, address 2 field, city, zip, blah, blah, blah. This new field, you have to convert it to a completely separate system. It's very data is just fun. And it's fun when it's done. And we could have paid somebody to do it for us, but it cost a lot. And so I just get to it when I have time and my staff have time. And it's just messy. And unfortunately, and our new system, Nick built our old business license software. And so I'm not knocking the system itself because he did it. I can't build anything like that. But it's outlasted its intended useful life, and it also is, you need more than we could have anticipated 15 years ago when he built it, 10 years ago.
It would be interesting to find out if there are communities who have business licenses renewed every year or 3 years.
A lot of cities do renew every year.
We used to.
So that's something we will, as a concept, talk about. Conceptually, when you do that, the fee essentially, instead of it being a one-time fee, if it's an annual fee, that business does get to take that fee off of their net profit taxes each year. So you bring it in one bucket and take it out of another bucket. So for us, a renewal shifts slightly where those funds come from. But I do think it would better align who is in town, who is active, who is not, which is a struggle currently. So. Oh, I'll take that check for you.
What's that?
Writing your $8 million donation.
Yeah,
Hey, we will-
working on that.
We will escort Ms.
$20
Coleman to the
million on
bank.
there, I'll pay you back.
Oh, 22 million.
I
Some
mean,
deficit up there about
the Chinese
98 bucks, I thought I
The Chinese entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I will make that motion with, and thanks to staff.
You would do what?
I make the motion and thank the staff.
Yeah.
So moved. All right, is there a second?
Yep, I'll second, and thank you again.
All right.
Well done.
All those in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?